Could you imagine a life free of fear? What if, eventually, it held no power over you and the feelings and emotions associated with it, things like stress, anxiety, worry, frustration, impatience, irritability, anger, etc., what if those things simply could be turned off, or at least tuned out? What if you could heal your fear by going into your fears, facing them, and overcoming them from the inside out? Well, my friends, it is all possible. And today we discuss the fear narrative that everyone is too afraid to voice out loud.
Welcome to the Human Narrative Podcast, where we share stories that resonate amongst us all.
Welcome back to another episode of the Human Narrative Podcast. I am your host, Clark, and I used to be a very fearful and anxious person. It's kind of why I drank alcohol so much for 13 years, because alcohol was the only thing that was able to shut my fear up until it didn't work anymore. And then I had to find a different way to deal with my fear and anxiety, which for me and my journey meant I had to get sober for good on October 1st, 2017, which then forced me to get to know my fears very well. And this is what I've learned, which is what I want to share with you today. I used to think that I wasn't afraid of anything, but now I know better. And as I've begun to understand my fear mentality better, I hear and I see it all around me. For instance, it's interesting when I ask someone, "Hey, what are you afraid of?" And then they respond, "I'm not afraid of anything." Yet, if I listen to their words, I feel their energy, and I watch their actions, I see nothing but a life dictated by fear. How that fear manifests for everyone is different, but it seems consistent that many people are oblivious to fear calling the shots. For instance, why do some people work so much and seem to sacrifice everything, even time with their family, for a career? Why are many people always stressed out about money, regardless if they have too much or none at all? Why do some people feel the need to micromanage their lives, as well as the lives of others? And why do so many hold on to relationships that are dead, while others are constantly chasing relationships that don't work? And then, why do people fall into the habitual use of alcohol or a substance or just an addiction in general, and they are unable to stop once they start? It's all fear, my friends. And when I say quote-unquote fear, look, I'm not talking about things like the fear of spiders, fear of the dark, fear of heights, fear of going outside, etc. Those are very valid fears, of course, for which there's probably some trauma in the past that has rooted those fears inside someone's mind, body, and spirit, and has become part of their identity. But the fear that I'm talking about, the fear that manifests as anxiety, stress, or an addiction of some sort, these are emotional, mental, and spiritual fears that can cripple and hinder our life on a daily basis, and maybe even, unfortunately, for an entire lifetime if we're not careful. To give you a few examples so you have something to think about in terms of the fears that I'm talking about, here's a few just for starters. All right, fear of failure, fear of not being loved, fear of being alone, fear of abandonment, fear of being a disappointment, fear of success, fear of being happy, fear of being unhappy, fear of being a loser, fear of people's opinions, fear of being poor, fear of having money, fear of death, fear. Now, I know that's a lot of fears to throw at you, and of course the list could go on, and I know that all of those fears can probably seem overwhelming, but it's okay, my friend. We wouldn't be human without feeling fear. And the crazy, beautiful thing is, we all struggle with all of those fears and so many more in one form or another. None of us are really ever alone in our struggles, even if our stories and journeys are a bit different or are vastly different. So when people tell me that they're not afraid of anything, yet their words, thoughts, and actions belie otherwise, I have to gently and lovingly call bullshit. Ironically, it's almost like we're all afraid of admitting that we are afraid. We're afraid to show weakness and vulnerability. We're afraid to ask for help. We're afraid to admit that there's a problem and we have no idea how to fix it, which then all of this stuff in turn transforms into an addiction of some sort. And just a quick side note, by addiction, I just want you to know that I mean anything that allows us to escape reality. And we allow these and we develop these addictions because the tangibility of a coping mechanism is far better and easier to understand than facing the cold, hard truth that we might be slaves to our fear. But, my friends, we do not have to be slaves to our fear. But until we understand our fears, learn what they are, and face them in one way or another, those fears will continue to trap us in a way of living that is less than we deserve. And for those that struggle with addiction, which is everyone in one way or another, our fears will keep us tethered to something or someone that robs us of who we are meant to be, even though we may desperately want to break those bonds and tethers of fear. But the question is, how do we break the bonds and tethers of fear? And you might not like it, but the simple answer is you have to name your fears and you have to face them. But I want to be very clear about something. Just because we learn to face our fears, it doesn't mean that they go away. Now, I am a big fan of sobriety. If you don't know, I'm also known as the sober Webb. And one of the big reasons that sobriety is so powerful, in my opinion, is because it teaches us how to handle life on life's terms, which ultimately means it comes down to facing our fears over and over. And I know that quote unquote life on life's terms is probably an overused statement, but it hits home for a reason. Life will always be hard. It will always be up and down. It will always be uncertain. It will always feel scary at times. And at any given moment in time, even when we're feeling on top of the world, fear will be present and will do its best to challenge our sense of self in the hopes of giving our ego a chance to take its power back over us. And that, my friends, is life. There is no getting away from it. And the sooner we accept that, the sooner we can face it and have utter confidence we will never give in to whatever it is that we use to cope with our life and with fear. Now, in terms of addiction, the reason so many drink, use drugs, and or just dive into an addiction of some sort is because they want to avoid what appears to them to be a frightening reality, a reality where it's easier to hide from the fear and emotions that have plagued them for so long instead of doing something about the said fears and emotions. But we can't have the life we want, no matter how much we complain everything is someone else's fault, or addiction is to blame, or we play the victim. We cannot have the life that we want until we stop and we turn and we run through our fears. Now, I am not suggesting that everyone try and overcome all their fears at once. It's important to flush them all out of hiding so that we can put a name to them. But facing each and every one takes time, support, and consistency. Awareness is key, however, and with awareness comes healing and a type of fearlessness in time. But instead of just talking hypothetically about fear, let's get into a real life example. For instance, let's study the fear of people's opinions. Now, everyone knows this. I don't care how confident or successful someone is, they know this fear. It can be a debilitating fear and a very constraining fear. It can prevent us from speaking our mind or voicing our needs and wants. It can mute us when we need to stand up for ourselves. It can limit us from being in social situations, impact how we dress, control how we act, affect how we believe people perceive us, and so much more. Of course, the simplest fix would be to just say, quote unquote, I don't care what anyone thinks of me anymore. But that is just not realistic or feasible right off the bat. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's not natural, realistic, or even right to walk through life pissing people off and subsequently just not caring what they think. That's not the answer to that fear, my friends. So the question is, how do we break a fear like this one? And the answer is, you begin to do soul and shadow work around the why. Why are you afraid of people's opinions in the first place? And the answer to that will only be found internally within yourself. What does a fear like that represent how someone feels about themselves? Does it mirror how they believe others perceive them? Does it reflect events and experiences in their life that might have put them in this fearful state of mind? Does it hide pain from the past that they are not able to deal with or think about? This is the type of awareness and acknowledgement we have to place on every single one of our fears if we want to break their hold on us. And I know it can feel overwhelming to look at a list of fears and wonder how you'll overcome them. But don't look at the big picture, my friends. Forget it. It's not about how am I going to do this? It's about where do I start? What am I capable of doing right here, right now? We will never get where we need to go if we don't start doing something, whether it be mentally, spiritually, or physically. We can't solve a problem if we're not willing to admit there is a problem, which means we cannot face fear if we're not willing to accept that it might hurt a bit to name it and face it. And to sum that idea up better than I could ever do, I'll close this episode out with a quote from an amazing book called The Tools by Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels. Quick side note. If you don't know Phil Stutz yet, check out the Jonah Hill documentary about him on Netflix. It's called Stutz, spelled Stutz, and it is an amazing introduction to the powerful work that Phil Stutz, does. And in his book, he talks about the force of forward motion in relation to fear. And the book says, quote, "If it seems crazy to desire fear, remember, you're not desiring the terrible event, just the feeling the fear brings up. It's a paradox. Only when you desire fear will you be able to take action in its presence, which is what courage consists of." End quote. My friends, there is a core of courage in all of us. And that courage, whether you know it's there or not, can allow you to walk through the fire of fear over and over. Face your fears, survive your fears, and you will find out that you are so much stronger and fearless than you ever could have imagined. And that is how you break the bonds and the tether of fear in your life. And, well, that's the narrative for the day, my friends, and I'm sticking with it. Much love and much life until the next episode. I appreciate you. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate you listening to my podcast, The Human Narrative. I'm Clark. I love you very, very much, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.
You've been listening to another episode from the Human Narrative Podcast. Don't forget to like and share, and we hope you consider subscribing.